everybody. Sorry for the technical difficulties, but this is part of our new normal, I think. Welcome to the next normal, strategies for reopening your corporate cafe. I am Tracy Lawler of JGL Food Service Consultants. Joining me here today from my team is Brooke Botwinick, Senior Associate, and Colleen Geyer, Junior Associate, Resident Zoom Expert, and probably somebody who's panicking at the moment, but these things happen with Zoom. We wanted to have this, this webinar because we're having so many conversations with clients across the country as they start planning to reopen their corporate cafes. Most of our clients we know are going to be coming back in phases, but there's so many questions. How are they going to maintain social distancing? What types of interventions need to happen in the cafe? What are the technological solutions? What about the pantry? What about catering? What are the financial implications? What is the subsidy going to be if this is a subsidy account? And so we wanted to get this panel of experts together, and it's a really well-rounded group. We have two representatives from our law firm clients. We have two food service providers, and we have a kitchen designer who will help us put this all together. Before I have them do their introductions, just a couple of housekeeping items. We are saving time for questions at the end of the session, so please use your ask a question button, which is on the bottom of your screen, not the chat function. And we are also recording this so that you'll be able to review it later. And again, if you, for any reason, are logged in as a panelist, Colleen is simply going to mute you, and you will be provided with another link to come back in. So with that, I'm going to ask Bob to introduce himself, and then we can go clockwise from introductions to the panel.
Sure. Everybody, Bob Dolan, Jacob Stolen Beer. I'm principal. We are food service design consultants headquartered in New York City. Do quite a bit of corporate B&I design work and working quite extensively of late, trying to come up with workarounds and see what the strategies are for new equipment and design solutions under this new set of guidelines. So happy to be on the panel.
Great. Jen?
Oh, there you go. Hello, I'm Jennifer Elliott, Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Great Performances. Founded in 1979 by Liz Newmark as a woman-only staffing company, Great Performances has grown to one of the premier catering and food service companies in New York. In addition to off-premise events, we're found as the exclusive caterer at prestigious cultural institutions. We operate numerous cafes, restaurants, and concessions, and through our workplace dining, we provide daily hospitality and meals at highly regarded institutions and company across New York, and that's covering many different industries. I've been at Great Performances for 10 years. I started in an operational role doing events and venues, working on back of house operations, standardizing systems, and now I oversee all of our contracted exclusive accounts. I'm the main point of contact for the clients, and I work with the managers and chefs to develop back of house operations and making sure that we're maintaining hospitality and innovation and goal setting. I also head our business development team in securing new accounts. We've been also keeping very busy over the last 2 months, feeding seniors. We're feeding about 40,000 seniors a week, handling everything from production and door-to-door delivery. This is a thank you to Tracy and the team for putting this together. I think it's a really interesting topic. It's always changing and we're learning more every day. So I'm excited about the discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Joe?
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Swallow. I am with Schulte, Roth & Zabel. I'm the Director of Facilities and Office Services here. And one of the responsibilities I have is for cafeteria, which we have contracted with RA, and trying to work through the scenario that we're dealing with today. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Liz?
Hi, everyone. My name's Liz Pollard, and I'm the Guest Services Manager at Latham & Watkins DC office. I've been with the firm for almost 13 years, and I am responsible for managing the Guest Services Department, which includes running the conference center, overseeing the reception, attendant, and audiovisual team, handling visitor arrivals, and managing our on-site cafe and catering operation. We opened our on-site dining operation about 3 years ago, and the population in the DC office is approximately 600 people. Lastly, in addition to the DC office, I work with other Latham offices across the globe that have or will soon have an on-site dining operation.
Great. And Jim?
And good afternoon, everybody. I too am excited to be here this afternoon. My name is Jim Russo. I am with Restaurant Associates here in New York City. I'm the Senior Vice President of Operations, mostly managing most of the larger banking accounts relationships.
Great. Thank you, everybody. So we've organized the talk today around 6 primary topics, and we're going to try and move at a good brisk pace. And our goal is to really impart some real advice that you can use and some real specifics that you might take back to think about your own operations. And so the first topic is managing the space from a flow perspective. So clearly, social distancing is going to be a big topic as everybody goes back. But how do you do that within your cafe space? How are you minimizing crowding? What kinds of policies might you put in place with respect to when and how people can come to the cafe? Are you considering assigning lunch times? What types of information are you putting in the cafe to help your customers understand where they should go and how they should approach the servery? So who'd like to jump in first on this?
Well, a couple of things to say on this one, since we're in the middle of putting a document together for the reopening of our office. Not sure when that date will be. Some of the things we're considering is we're going to have a grab and go offering only. There will be no hot meals or anything. Our goal is to have no more than one person go through the cafeteria at a time. We'll have distancing markings on the floor where the people will queue up, and they will go in on one side of the cafeteria, exit out, and walk around the floor, and we'll have directionals for them to follow going through. We're also looking at some online options and delivery options to their offices to minimize the traffic, and removing the seating in our cafeteria as well.
Great, thanks, Joe. And I think one of the things we talked about on our call last week in preparation was that your design essentially has one hallway leading to the cafe. And so people go down that hallway into the servery and back up that same hallway. And I think that's an interesting intervention to really redirect their whole exit so that they're going around the back of the cafe. And I think for many of my clients thinking about their designs, I know the layout is quite similar. Liz, what are some of the things you're doing over at your firm?
Yeah, some of the same things that Joe mentioned, obviously, with a lot of signage and a lot of physical and directional barriers to promote that distancing. We're also removing some of the self-serve options and pulling that behind the line just to prevent folks from lingering in this space. Obviously, reconfiguring the space, reducing the seating capacity. Something else that we're looking at is, employing the use of what we call our open air merchandiser in this space. We already have that, and it really offers a good opportunity for people to come, grab something, and go very quickly. In some cases, we can implement a drop-off table, a drop-off pickup table, depending on the item, to really minimize that interaction. Our primary goal, one of our primary goals at this point, is to adhere to the distancing guidelines and to minimize the interaction between individuals. So any solutions that we can implement where people can just come in very quickly, get what they need, and then leave is what we're working towards.
Great. And Jennifer, what about you? What are some of the things you're putting in place?
A lot of the things that were discussed, one of the things we're talking about is eliminating all self-service stations is the first go, but maybe turning some of those self-service stations into a place for pickup. I think delivery and pre-order and pickup is going to be a big change, and taking something like an existing salad bar and turning that into a place where we can have temperature controlled pickup for grab and go items is some of the things that we're looking at. And then taking any form of service station and turning it into an attended station by using sneeze guards to cover up certain areas. at the cashier stations, putting up barriers or completely eliminating the cashiers. And they could work with pickup and pre-order and doing as much contactless payment as possible.
Great, thanks. And Jim?
We're certainly using a lot of the visual cues like social distancing floor signs, stanchions, and other wayfindings for all of our guests, and whether it be on plasma screens, floor decals, handouts, or entrance communications, just to let all of our guests know what the new cafeteria service style looks like. On the client end, we have been open doing some essential services, and certainly looking at how busy these cafes are going to be with the social distancing that will be in place. We have some clients that are looking to limit the number of people that they'll allow in the cafeteria at any one time, using the 28 square foot per person space divided by how many square foot they have available in their serveries. Others are changing some of the times around that their guests are going to be able to come and eat, so it's not like that 12 o'clock rush hour we once had. And some others are just going to a mobile platform ordering solution only, as we begin this first phase on the reopening, and we have reduced populations.
So the 28 square feet per person, is that a measure that RA is recommending or that your specific client came up with, or is that coming from elsewhere? I haven't heard 28 yet.
That's coming from elsewhere, and it's 28 foot around any one central point is really the available space to keep people spaced 6 foot apart. So
6 feet.
it's
Okay.
kind of a mathematical equation.
That's a great metric. Thank you.
Sure.
And so as we start to segue into some of the other considerations that you might actually put in your survey from an equipment perspective, I'd like to move over to Bob Dolan. We had some conversations last week about some of the equipment interventions he's putting in, both from a perspective of blocking potential germs as well as new delivery options. So Bob, if you could talk a little bit about some of the things you're seeing that's both alleviating the crowd control issues, but also addressing some of the delivery options or ways to move people out of the servery.
Sure. So the first thing probably to talk about is what everybody shared with the elimination of self-service, at least temporarily. That's going to necessitate some modification to the food shields that are currently in place. So if you're lucky enough to have an adjustable guard, you can make the modifications relatively simply. If not, if you have fixed design guards, you're going to need to close the opening. So the current health code for a closed opening is the top of the glass at 60 inches. So you'll want to at least get your glass up that high. However, in my opinion, 60 inches does well to protect the food, but doesn't protect the person to person that I think most people are going to feel safer with. So you may want to consider bringing that glass up another 6 inches to maybe 66 inches. The other thing I'll share is, since everybody's rushing to make these modifications, lead times for glass and plexiglass are anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So depending on when you want to open, you may want to start that process a little bit early.
Could you also just talk a little bit about the plexi versus the glass? I know you
Sure.
talked about that last week, and I thought that was really interesting.
Sure. So plexi is easier to source, faster to install, and easier to cut and manipulate. However, it's a lot more temporary in terms of how it wears. Plexiglass will etch quickly over time. It scratches. So if you're planning on doing something, say at a cashier for a few weeks, it's a great solution. Tempered glass, if you're going to change, for instance, a station, that you may just say, listen, this is going to be a serve station forever, or for the time being, or for a year, your better option is to go with tempered glass, which is more expensive, has to be ordered, and takes a little bit more time to get.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
And I know we talked a little bit about, as we move into more of the operations, one of the things we're hearing so much from everybody is technology. The technology is going to be a solution here. A lot of clients are looking at mobile ordering. They're looking at pickup elsewhere. I'd love to hear what, particularly Jennifer and Jim, what some of the technological solutions you're putting in place at your corporate units are at this point.
Certainly. So we're looking at a lot of things here, and we understand, technology is going to play a leading role, but, with the human connection. So, mobile ordering probably tops our list. This is something we've had in the past, very slow to adopt. I think in all of the B&I locations we had it in, we probably had a 3% rate of people that used it at that time. We certainly see that increasing now and have ramped up, the capabilities of that. And mobile ordering, to be used as a solution to keep people, outside of our cafeterias, if you will. Something that has the capability of texting the people when their order is ready and bringing them to, various pickup points throughout the building to keep them out of the cafeteria to start with. So mobile ordering will play a front role on this. We're looking at robotic deliveries in some of our college locations, so increasing, that. We're looking at frictionless retail, sort of like the Amazon to go. So, in our C-stores and marketplaces, we've developed technology now where people could walk in, take what they want, and walk out. So, that's another big thing that's coming ahead. Ordering ahead with multiple pickup spots throughout again, and whether they be high-tech solution like food lockers, which we're going to talk about later, or low-tech just pickup points. We were looking at that. Grocery mobile ordering, another thing, in our non-rural areas that was really didn't do well in the past. We certainly see a great opportunity as there's less retail on Main Street for us to be able to deliver grocery orders. And even sanitary with technology in the back of the house with touchless time clocks, front of the house, touchless cutlery dispensers, and certainly first and foremost, touchless sink and towel dispensers. We have a few clients even looking at placing sinks outside of the front entrance of the cafes so people could wash their hands as they walk in. So some things like that are some of the things we're looking at this time.
Great, thanks. And Jennifer?
Yeah, definitely mobile ordering is top of the conversation. We're talking to two different companies. One's Grab, they work with airports, and the other is Flash Order. There's a lot of our units don't have existing points of sale, and so they're able to work either with a point of sale or without an existing point of sale, but they still have the kitchen display screens as well as the printing capability. We're looking at also back of house, maybe RFID hand washing. So like, how do we maintaining hand washing compliance? Something that we've been talking to our sanitation partners with. It's also foot pedals for the hand sinks, as well as automatic dispensers for the front of house.
Great. And Liz and Joe, what about you? Are there particularly mobile ordering or pre-order that you've already implemented, or are you going to be implementing something?
Well, for Latham, that is something that we're looking to implement. Right now, we already are a cashless operation, and we have a self-checkout mode available to us that we've been utilizing even before we exited our offices. But we are looking at creating mobile ordering platform, which doesn't exist just yet. And also finding a point of sale that is compatible with Apple Pay and other NFC technologies.
Yep. And Joe? Did we lose Joe? Well, so I think hopefully Joe will be back, but I think, as consultants, you're there? Okay.
Yeah, sorry. We're moving in the same direction as Latham. We want to do online ordering. We're going to go cashless. We have an option right now where people can put money on their security card so they can use that as a method of payment if they come into the cafeteria. We're also looking at redirecting our cafeteria personnel because we're not going to be coming back with a full staff, as we're going to be moving in phases. So we're going to be redirecting those resources for deliveries and assisting with the grab and go as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think everybody agrees that technology is going to play a big role. I think it's going to be interesting to see how it rolls out, because most of the bigger companies obviously already have a proprietary system that they can easily roll into their units. Smaller companies may not, and so finding a product that is going to work with your existing POS in a time frame that makes sense, I think that's going to be where the challenge is. You know, we've certainly seen a number of other interesting technologies that I certainly could see being valuable. So there's a Blue Fox, which we've seen in a number of proposals, which actually tracks the number of people in any room based on cell phone usage, so that you get really accurate counts of who's in the server or space when and how they're using it. So I think that kind of technology could be very useful, but in terms of gearing up and getting it moving right away, I think that there may be a big rush for some of those things. Several people have talked about this idea of delivering to somewhere other than the cafe, and the idea of food lockers has come up, as well as food delivery tables. So Bob, I'd love you to talk a little bit about what you're seeing with respect to food lockers.
Sure. So this is relatively new technology that was well underway way before COVID hit us. It had been rolled out with some limited success in the retail sector, although if anyone remembers Itza in New York, it was short-lived. But the technology really paved the way for I think where we are today. So I think what's in the space now, if you're familiar with the Amazon locker, is more of an ambient solution. It's a cabinet. The slick part of it is it talks to the customer. It uses a barcode, which then unlocks your locker and you can get your items. So that sort of a thing is available right now at a reasonable cost point, I think, and a lot of it comes with its own software. There's companies like Apex that are doing that. The next version of this, where we've been evolving this, is in temperature control. So you'll see on the upper right there, that's a product called Ondo, O-N-D-O. These are temperature controlled. You can adjust the temperature of each of the cabinets. Also comes with its own proprietary software if you want it, although I'm told it will integrate back to existing software, front of house software if you have it. These cabinets are available in different sizes. You can set them hot or cold depending on the order, ADA compliant. And then what I'm showing in the lower left is sort of, you know, I wouldn't say it's ready for prime time, but it's coming really soon, and that would be addressable, programmable fascias on those cabinets. So part of the problem with the food lockers is you need them for a certain part of the day, and then what happens to that wall when there's no food in it? It just really becomes a dead zone in your building. So I think a lot of the interactive LCD, clear LCD, different glass options, maybe pocketing them so that they go away, enables you to put these things closer to the workspace. So on the work floors where you would distribute food to them, rather than putting them in your cafeteria, which you can do, and have the folks come to you. If they blend a little better, I think we can deploy them remotely, which would be, I think in the short term, a real attractive solution.
And Bob, do you know roughly sort of what's the range of costs of the food lockers at this point? I'm sure it's very wide.
Yeah, it really is hard to say, especially when you get into the software. Some of the software requires licensing and so on and so forth. In terms of the hardware, let's say that unit that we're seeing in the upper right, which is those 5 rows of lockers, I think something like that is around, it's less than 100,000. It's probably closer to 50 without getting into the software solutions.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we also talked about as a group last week was just that clearly everything is moving to single serve individual packages, at least for some period of time, which comes up right against all of the sustainability goals that I know all of my clients have. How do you see that evolving over time, and how do you see that sort of aligning with sustainability goals? Liz, do you want to touch on that a little bit from Latham's perspective?
Sure. I think in the immediate future, everything will be individually wrapped and prepackaged. We are trying to do this responsibly and in line with our sustainability initiatives, but we really need to focus on the health and safety of our people first at the moment. So we might end up taking a half a step back regarding, what products we're using, or, what increases in our waste, what increases happen. That said, we were already in the process of looking into products that are, the bento boxes and the clamshells and the like, that are either 100% post-recyclable material or compostable. So we're really looking to just find the best products, right, that fit both categories. When the time comes, and we're going to be constantly evaluating, when the time comes, we'll be able to put our sights more back towards our sustainability initiatives. But for the short term, we really need to make sure that we are limiting any spread of germs, and therefore prepackaging and individually wrapping everything.
Jennifer, I know GP is obviously sustainability is such a big part of your DNA. So I know you were talking some about some of the items that you're sourcing. I'd love to hear what you all are thinking.
Yeah, it's the same way. Everything has to be individually packaged when we start, because the safety comes first. I think part of it is making sure that we're communicating to the client. A lot of the companies we work with have sustainability committees, making sure we're having that communication with the guests so that they understand what we're doing and the steps we're taking to make sure we're keeping sustainable practices in mind. So we're looking at compostable containers, but that becomes tricky sometimes because not all buildings compost. So then we're looking at recyclable containers, but even compostable, then you have to look at a compostable label. And a lot of what we're looking at is the boxes containing everything from the start. It's the flatware, and it's all the condiments, and it's the beverage. So it's multiple boxes and multiple wrappers. So really trying to look for compostable products when possible. And then as alternative, we're sourcing single-use boxes. So we're looking at different companies that can make a single-use box that we would sanitize between usages, so that at least it's one component that people won't throw away at the end of each use. And I think, sustainability also comes like a wellness component too. And, I think as people are going to be talking more about how they're keeping healthy and staying healthy, and working with our registered dietitian to make sure that, with the limited production that we can do with a boxed meal, that the meals are taking a wellness and a nutrition component into the factor of the menu development.
Great, thanks. And Bob, I know you also had some equipment you were talking about that you're installing at some of your client locations that does address some of those sustainability issues. So do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So we're definitely going to see a total increase in waste in all of our facilities. I know there were a lot of clients that were trying to make a push to go from disposable to permanent wear, and that's going to have to hit a pause, I think, for a while, because that system just isn't really a sustainable option when you're trying to limit, viral contaminants and so on. So one of the things I just wanted to briefly talk about was, how do we manage the amount of waste responsibly without, just throwing it down onto the loading dock. In most cases in New York, that stuff you could separate up top, but then when it gets down to the loading dock, it goes right back to the rear of the truck. So what I'm showing here are just some of the things that are available out there that allows some on-site processing of some of this equipment. So you can see some of the stats. So a lot of it is just a volume reduction, 10 bags of garbage to 2, using a disposer and a masticator. Some of the solutions will produce compostable products. So if you place that unit that's in the upper left, if that unit gets placed in your kitchen and it's pre-consumer, then the output that you're getting there is fully compostable. And then on the bottom is a relatively new development that requires, so that's basically a grinder which produces a slurry, which then that slurry is pumped to a holding tank, which is somewhere in your building or on your campus. And then that product gets picked up by an outside vendor and turned into a renewable energy source, either with a anaerobic digestion or turn back into heat.
Great, thank you. And Jim, I know we're starting to, I'm trying to watch the time here. So talking a little bit about, I'm going to move on to labor and just scaling labor as we start to move into reopening. Can you talk a little bit about how RA is looking at that and how you may be looking at cross-training and using people for functions that they may not have performed in the past?
Certainly. So, we certainly realize that we're going to be in a labor-intense new environment. All of these offshoot locations and delivery options are going to require a large amount of our available employees. To that end, we also understand that it's going to be to a very limited number of client associates that'll be returning to the workforce. So it's going to be a very delicate balance of how we look at what our labor percentage looks like in this new model. We certainly know it's going to be at a higher percentage than it was when we left. But it's really refocusing our existing employees to these new positions, if you will. So again, catering was one of the first things to leave when we left the space. It'll probably be the last to come back. So it's what do we do, with the catering managers, with the catering attendants, and we're looking at our opportunity here is in fact lies in the fact that when we're delivering to all these off-site locations and all of these points throughout the building, that they would be the perfect individuals to redistribute that labor towards. So really, it's just looking at our workforce, looking at the positions that we know will be open, and understanding that sanitation will require additional resources and extra people around that with all the new SOPs that we're generating as a result of this and the increased cleanings and disinfectings. So really, it's looking at all that and putting our available employee list towards that end.
Great, thank you. And I'd like to move on to pantry operations. We had a conversation about this last week. I know there's a lot of different viewpoints of whether pantries are going to stay open or not. Joe, I'd love to hear from you what Schulte is doing with respect to your pantries.
Yeah, we're taking consideration similar to the opening of the cafeteria. We're taking the pantries in a similar consideration where if you shut pantries down, people have to have their coffee. And they're going to be going on the outside to get coffee. And our objective is to minimize the traffic from outside. We're going to be opening our pantries, but you're going to be limited again, one person in the pantry at a time. We're going to have markers for queuing to the pantry. The refrigerators, we are quite a few considerations, but right now we're considering no one brings food from home. The only thing that'll go in there is the milk for the coffee to try and separate where the milk is from where food would go. So we'll just have the shelf with food only is where we are right now. We also have these spaces that are called connect spaces on a couple of floors, which are larger areas where people could come and sit. And we are going to terminate people using that area for lunches, and strictly coffee only. Get your coffee and you move along. So that's what
okay. Liz, what about you?
Doing.
I would say the same thing as Joe. We might take a slightly different approach to the refrigerator usage. The only thing I would add is, again, there will be a lot of signage and a lot of products there for folks to disinfect the surfaces in the space, and we'll be replacing some of the supplies in there and eliminating some temporarily. Things like the forks and the mugs and the plates, right? We'll instead deploy individually wrapped products that are disposable for people to use until further notice.
And will you move back to all disposable cups? I know so many of our clients have their branded coffee cups. And although there's frequently arguments about who washes them or the lack of them getting washed, I'm assuming those are going away for the time being.
Immediately, yes, and we'll see when they will return. You know, putting them through a dishwasher takes care of, you know, effectively cleaning them. However, they're also out there exposed, semi-exposed, let's say, in a cabinet where other people could touch, and you're not aware of that before you take it. So in the short term, we thought it's just a safer option to get rid of them.
Absolutely. And Jen, what about you? Do you have many pantry operations, and are you considering changes to those?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mix. Some are completely closing them. They don't want anyone. They don't want them open. Others are looking at having an attendant stationed at each pantry, in either through like a delivery system. So if you wanted a coffee, you would order it through the system and the attendant would bring it to your desk, or you would come up to the pantry, ask for something, and that one attendant would get what you needed. We're working on like snack boxes. So again, it's just a single grab item where people aren't kind of rummaging through different things and touching different things. I have been hearing a lot of people eliminating any reusable items, mugs, flatware, everything would go to disposable. I have been talking to some of our coffee providers are looking at like a Bluetooth bean to cup machine. So you could go through an app on your phone is something that a few people are developing. So I think we're going to see some more technology there. And I think vending is an interesting option for some pantries. We tried to put some like gloves and things by the pantries like pre-closing. We didn't find that many people use them. But I think as long as you have someone there and all the sanitizing solution and disinfectant there for people to use, I think they're more likely to use that after they've used these machines. But I think vending might give you a little bit more of a temperature controlled and more choice in some of the pantry options.
Great, thank you. And Jim, what about you? Anything, are you all doing anything different than what we've heard from the other panelists?
You know, I have one or two clients now that, you know, understand how many touch points there really are and how little supervision there is over all these pantries in their locations. And, you know, some clients have upwards of 60 plus pantries in any one location. So some of them have decided to close them and offer free coffee in the cafeterias. So that would help us repurpose that labor that would normally be delivering to those pantries into the cafes and be able to serve the coffee from the cafes. And this certainly is something everybody's looking at as well, because who wants all of your employees walking in, touching the coffee every morning that everybody else has touched. So it helps them with cost, because again, these PCs and, you know, whatever machine they might be using, these coffee pods are quite expensive. So it is a lot cheaper for us to brew it in 1.5 gallon batches down into the cafeteria. So I thought that was a clever way to, you know, get them out of that space.
Yeah.
And certainly, you know, the same with the machinery. It's, you know, creating a non-touch point in that space is going to be difficult. We do have some that are looking to go to creamers so that not everybody's touching the milk. Others are looking to go with the half pints to eliminate that. And certainly everything that was on the counters to be placed in drawers at minimum.
Mm-hmm. And Bob, are there coffee brewers that are more touchless that we'll be seeing on the horizon?
Yeah, they're out there now. I mean, everybody's familiar with the traditional bean to cup, but the problem with that is there's still a touch screen on it. So I think it's just a matter of time before that fades. So the one slide I put in here is a system that truly is touchless. It works off of your phone, which, you know, by now everybody has. So you can actually order and pay from that phone with this. So this system, you know, I saw this at least 6 years ago. So it's been out there for a while, which, you know, beyond this being the one solution, I think the technology then is repeatable for the others that are in the space with semi-automatic machines to catch up. But I think this could be a solution for sure. These are a little costly. I think the install price of one of these systems is about $25,000. That includes a maintenance contract that's required, because this thing, as you can imagine, it's simple on the top, which only means it's incredibly complicated underneath. Those two go together. So what you don't see is the motor. Yeah. But
Okay.
a low-tech solution that some clients have been discussing is putting in a barista station to replace all the coffee points. I mean, there's a higher labor cost with that, but it also elevates the experience so they can sort of sell it a little bit. And it could be a short-term solution for a lot of folks.
Great, thanks. So let's move on quickly to catering. I know we all spoke about it briefly last week, and the general consensus was that catering was probably going to be pretty limited as we start to come back. But I'd love to hear particularly from Liz and Joe, being law firms who do traditionally quite a lot of events, how you envision that starting to ramp up, and what some of the things you're thinking about are for future events.
Well, for Latham, you know, initially when we head back into the offices, we're going to have a pretty restrictive meeting policy, and let's say a somewhat, therefore, restrictive policy on visitors, just because we're not necessarily going to have them come into the office if they're not actually going to have a meeting. The decision at this point for the DC office, at least, looks to be that we won't serve catering in the short term. You know, if the recommendation is that folks wear masks as they're out and about and away from their private desk, well, then they can't really safely, you know, enjoy a beverage and eat a lunch in the same room as their colleagues. So initially, catering is going to take a bit of a hit. As things hopefully relax, we'll bring it back, of course, but it will be in like that bento box style serving, right? We're going to make sure that it's pre-portioned, not go right back to their typical buffet where everyone picks up the same set of tongs. Rather, we will make sure that everything is sealed and people can just grab what they like and sit down and eat it with their individually wrapped cutlery as well. Longer term is TBD. You know, we'll have to kind of wait and see. It'll be interesting to see what happens with those typical self-serve buffets. Are they going to be a thing from the past? Will they reemerge and take on a new shape? You know, we're just going to have to see. Things we're thinking about in terms of beverages, you know, we could be a bit of a restaurant now, right? We might be taking individualized beverage orders and delivering them into the room. In some offices, we might be able to have a centralized beverage station on the different floors in our conference center so folks can go up and ask, let's say, a bartender of sorts for their drink. And then the same thing with the buffets, you know, when they come back with however they look, are we going to serve them, right? The old school Mother's Day brunch buffets that we all went to as kids with the big chef with the hat, are they going to put the food on the plate for us? So we don't know, we're just talking about these things, making sure that we're thinking of them from all angles, but initially, we don't expect much. We don't expect any catering, and then very little. And then when it reemerges, we'll want to make sure that it's prepackaged.
Great. Joe, what about you? Is Schulte having a similar viewpoint?
We are. We're going to restrict meetings to must-have client meetings. And it's, you know, there will be limited seating in the conference rooms to adhere to the space requirements. Any food will be prepackaged salads, grab-and-go kind of sandwiches that they'll be able to order from a menu that would be prepared and delivered, but they would be wrapped. The only place that we have coffee mugs or anything are in the conference rooms, and we'll be removing those, and it'll completely disposable in there. And we're looking at doing this through the end of the year right now. Because we just, no one knows what's going to happen. And we feel that from now through the end of the year, once we do go back, we're going to minimize the amount of conferences that we have. In-house conferences are not going to take place. We're asking people to use Zoom or one of those platforms.
Okay. And then, so the last topic we want to move on to is financial. I know that we've talked about a lot of changes that we know are coming down the pike, and some that we're anticipating. And I think that we had a conversation last week that to put it bluntly, I think most of us do anticipate costs of goods sold and labor and some operating costs may increase. How are you looking to, how are you going to address that? Are you looking at offsetting and potentially developing new sources of revenue? Are you taking it as, this is a hit for the next number of months? Jim, why don't you had some good points on that. I would love to hear from you on that.
Sure. So, this is going to be tough financially. And again, I think I said before, I don't want to be Debbie Downer here, but we have some big headwinds coming our way. And I think we all just first need to be cognizant of just that fact and really take a look at it. And again, in any of our cafeterias, if we had 40 or 50% participation for breakfast and lunch, what can we do to increase that to help offset some of these costs? I think, again, that is our biggest opportunity here, is just to be mindful of the costs that are heading our way and really trying to grab that 80, 70% participation. People coming back will certainly, want to make sure that they're eating in a place that's safe. So really getting that communication out to them, letting them know, just how safe we are. I certainly think in these B&I locations, they're going to have less choices to go out of the buildings to eat anymore after this. So that'll certainly help us with our participation. I know a couple clients actually are only going to let them in once because, again, they're going to have some thermal cameras and so on and so forth in the lobby and really screening their people on entry. So they don't want to do that multiple times a day. So they're looking at trying to keep them in the building. And again, when we keep them in the building, we want to make sure that we have the offerings to keep them there. But looking at some of the costs, the PPE, we're seeing in our Asia business that when they came back, they had to come back with 15 days worth of gloves, masks, and chemicals. So we'll certainly have to look at that. The training requirements, I don't think in the past we've really talked too much about disinfection, So I think that's a new thing that we're going to have to train our employees on. And certainly New York's going to mandate that our employees have received this training upon re-entry to the business. So, it's cleaning, it's sanitizing, and then it's the extra step of disinfection. So certainly we have to look at all that. And then I talked about it early. I think groceries to go will, be a good option for us in the business as we return, and really providing meal replacements for people when they go home after working when they come back. And we certainly see that the shifts from our Asia crystal ball will be split because a lot of the clients will not want their employees commuting all at the same time. So we're going to have probably different peak and off-peak periods that we're going to play around with. And certainly we see this now currently in the essential businesses that we're running. So a lot of good stuff to come. And I think, if we plan correctly, we'll be able to minimize a lot of these costs that are headed our way.
Great, thanks. And Jennifer, what about GP? Are you looking at other revenue streams that you might be able to create in some of your client locations?
Yeah, with Jim, I've also talked to a few clients who are talking about potentially just having their employees enter once and then leave once and not leave during the day, which I think will help participation, but also, looking at the labor cost of having them, they are looking at like scattered in times and out times. And so how do you increase that period of time when you're doing meal service would impact labor. We're looking at grocery delivery, an online delivery service, either ordering online and picking up before you leave. I think anything that can help prevent somebody from having to stop somewhere on their way home is definitely going to be incentive to help increase revenue. We're looking at meal boxes for dinner for your family. So again, instead of having to stop somewhere on the way home, a lot of the restaurants not looking at opening back up again. How do you provide an opportunity for someone to purchase a dinner? And then, maybe some fun things like, adding in like picnic baskets for the weekend. I think we have to work together with our clients to really incentivize people to come back to the office. And how do we get them excited about what we've been doing, what our staff has been doing. Of course, the safety and sanitation is number one. But I think, ways we can work together to get people excited about what we're doing and what we're serving is going to help bring people back to the office.
Great, thank you. And so I think in the nature of time, we're going to skip the last topic, which is communication, because I think everybody here understands, obviously, communicating all of the efforts that you're going to be making to both your employees and your food service employees and your customers. Making them feel safe is going to be part and parcel of what everybody needs to do. But I'd love to hop over and just address a couple of these questions in the remaining 4 minutes or so that we have. So we have a question about subsidy. What measures are your organizations taking to offset increased subsidy costs associated with reduced cafe services? So I'll direct this to Liz and Joe. Has there been a strong focus on the subsidy, or are you sort of looking at this as an unavoidable cost at this point in time? Liz?
Both. A bit of it is just bad luck, right? But we are, of course, going to be and are working very closely with our operator to minimize spend and save costs wherever we can. There's certain fixed costs that are what they are. However, there can be smart decisions. We can implement good, better practices to make sure that we are only buying what we need, using what we need, as it translates into a sale. In terms of labor, we'll get some different value out of our labor, right? There's going to be heavy cleaning requirements involved. So those people might not actually be preparing food, but they are more than willing to work with us and instead be a cleaner, right? A properly trained cleaner. So we're still getting value for that labor spend. It just looks a little bit different. So really, it's just going to be constant communication and partnership, really looking around the corner to make sure we're only taking on expenses that we need to take on to try to keep that, ratio of expenses to sales as low as we can.
Great. And Joe, what about you? Is Schulte taking any measures in terms of subsidy control at this point? Joe? So I think I'm not sure if we've lost Joe again, but we'll move on. One of the things that we also talked about just from a subsidy control perspective on our call last week was the idea of incorporating either more vending or alternative delivery. Specifically, one of the things we talked about was farmer's fridge, that for some smaller units, perhaps moving to that kind of service, at least for some period of time, particularly when the population was so far down, might be a step that would help reduce the subsidy, because that's a relatively low cost item. So we really only have another minute. One final question. Let's see, I know I'm not covering all of them, but here's a very specific one. Has anyone come across any tabletop dispensers for condiments, in particular for coffee stations? So Jennifer and Jim, any specifics you can provide there?
I haven't come across anything that's like automated or anything. Really what we're looking at right now is the clients are really pushing for as little out on the counter as possible. So as much that can be packaged within the box, that's what we're focusing on right now, is keeping it all contained.
Mm-hmm.
And the same with us, it's really, we're limiting everything to PC, and some people will go to a served model as opposed to self-serve, and those doing the self-serve are just going to put out more tissue papers and obviously eliminate any bulk.
Great. So we are just at time, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. I really want to, first of all, thank all of the panelists for taking the time to join us. We really appreciate your insights. I'm hoping it's been helpful for all of the participants. If you have any questions we weren't able to get to, please feel free to reach out. Keep in touch with us, and let's continue talking and helping to find solutions for everybody. Thanks so much.
Tracy, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.